Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the beginning. So what happened was, these are all beginnings of a story. All words that, when brought together, signify that it is time to listen and take in what is being said next. The beginnings of a journey. Now, what is a story? A simple way of thinking of a story is events linked in a sequence across time according to a plot. So basically, a story is the meaning that has been made by taking different things that have happened together. And that creates a story. And stories are something that is so much a part of our lives. We are, from a very young age, are told stories, whether the stories are told at bedtime, or we are told stories on TV, on PBS, or we are listening to stories being shared between people. Stories are constantly being shared and offered, and so we are surrounded by stories. And those stories help us understand ourselves and understand the world that we are living in. Some of these stories are also ones that are given to us or told about us. So they may not be the stories that we would share, or our engagement is the stories that people have said, oh, this is your story. And we have to navigate what that means, what that story tells us. Because when you change the story, then you change your understanding of what those events mean. And so we can redefine ourselves if we change the stories that we share. And this is a key component of the field of narrative therapy, which asks you to look at the different stories that you tell. And remember, as we talked about, the stories are events linked in a sequence across time according to a plot. What if you looked at those events but changed the plot? How does that help you understand what those events mean? So you're not creating fiction. You are reinvestigating the story and finding new meaning. And sometimes when you do that work, you find other events that you did not realize were there or had forgotten about, but help shape a new story. When I was young, like elementary school, I loved to sing. I sang in the children's choir at church, and I loved singing in choirs that came up or opportunities to sing at school. I loved singing. It was just so much a part of my experience. And then at some point in high school, actually, no, this was middle school. At some point in middle school, I stopped singing. And I don't know what exactly happened. Like I can't pinpoint the moment where the shift happened, but my memory is that I couldn't sing. It must have been my voice changing and trying to understand that, and no one supporting that my understanding. I'm pretty sure that had to be what it was, but I don't remember a moment or an instance where someone said something. I just know that my narrative changed to for me to say that I don't sing. And so I stopped singing. Well, I stopped singing in public. Um, I did love, still love to sing, and there were many times that I would be at home in my room singing to songs on the radio or to one of my CDs. So I did enjoy singing, but not to a place where I would do it publicly. Like singing in a choir was not, and I would tell people, "Oh, I can't sing," and that maintained for quite a while until several years after college. Um, and I remember I was at a concert for the Boston Rainbow Gospel Choir, and I remember listening to them perform, and gospel music is always something that has resonated with me, and I just loved the music, and there was a part of me that really wanted to sing with them. Uh, and at the end, they mentioned that they welcomed everyone to sing, and I was too still had that narrative that I couldn't sing, so I said I didn't join, but I kept thinking about it. So the second time I went to one of their concerts and they said that, I said, well, I guess I can try. Um, and so I went and sang, and no one said anything. And in fact, someone said I had a nice voice, which wasn't something in my awareness. And so I reconnected with my ability to sing. And I realized, looking back, that in all the time that I talked about I couldn't sing, I never talked about how much I sang as a child. I didn't reconnect to that until after I reclaimed singing. And I remembered that part of the story. And so now, uh, sing whenever I can and sing with choirs. And uh, in fact, not too long after I joined the gospel choir, I had the opportunity to actually sing in a musical. I and started doing musicals. I really jumped into that part of myself. Um, but I had to reclaim it and then re-evaluate the story that I told. And so the story I tell now is much different than the story I told uh, many years ago. And as we continue to think about these stories that we tell, there are also stories that get told in community. I mean, think for a moment. What are the stories that you tell about your family or your community or your congregation? What types of stories are they? Now, what are the stories that have led you to be the group of people that you are? And what stories might lead you to be the people you want to be? What stories might create the space, the opening to realize your vision of your congregation, to help be the change you want to see? You know, I see this all the time. This sense of uh, the stories that we tell and stories they're holding. Sometimes the stories that we tell, particularly as organizations, tend to be much more aspirational than the reality. Which on the flip side, for some reason, I see that the stories that people tell are often about who they are afraid they might be, but not necessarily who they are or who they could be. And so as you think about your stories, you know, I've experienced in UU congregations this clear story of how open and welcome they are. And I've seen things written in orders of service when I've gone to visit that talk about their openness and their welcoming, which makes me feel so excited to be there that all of me will be accepted and embraced. And my experience of the congregation doesn't match that story. My experience might be that the congregation that talks about, you know, their openness might not actually talk to me because I'm new. Um, I have been at the congregations that says, you know, take a red cup and someone will speak to you, and have sat the entire time in coffee hour with a red cup, talking to no one, except for someone that I might have known beforehand and reached out to. Or the sense of everyone is accepted, but not really. Um, and and so I think there's a tension between who we are and who we want to be. And we can tell a different story that maybe honors who we are, but can lead us towards that aspirational peace. There are also stories that are not shared, stories that get lost in the midst of things. I've been doing my family history since the beginning of the pandemic. It was kind of uh, my pandemic like a pandemic work, um, and and I've been doing family history before, but I just really threw myself back into it. And I've discovered so many stories that were never passed down. Stories of people who I would have loved to know about, but that stories weren't shared and connected. Stories of ancestors who were pioneers. And I when I hear of the pioneering time, which has its own problematic pieces in itself, but when I hear of the people who were involved, I rarely hear of someone who was Black being involved. And yet I have stories of ancestors starting communities and or being founding members of cities that I had never heard, and would be wonderful pieces of knowledge to grow up with, of engaging. And I wonder what other stories do not get told because they have been lost or erased, even. They've been removed from our understandings. So I invite you to think about your stories and our collective stories as a congregation. Do we tell the stories we really want to tell? Are there stories that are missing? How can we reclaim those lost stories and live into who we want to be and who we might already be if we just understood? And so I close this part of our story together. And although I cannot guarantee a happily ever after, I do wish that for each and every one of you. Blessed be.